Well, I am excited to have my sweet friend back with me on this episode, Dr. Cynthia Hickman. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Dr. Huntley?
I
Long
am,
time no see. No
I
long time
know.
no talk to, huh?
I know. Like, okay, so just in case y'all didn't catch that, she also serves as like a big sister role. So, so
Ooh,
no talk to. We haven't actually talked in a little while. It has been a little while,
yeah, has
but we go way back.
mm,
We were in grad school together,
mhm,
graduated
mhm.
together,
Yeah,
and she has also been on the podcast. It's been way, way, way long time ago. I have to look it up
mhm.
and see how long it's been exactly. But I am so delighted to have you join me back on the podcast, and thank you for being here. Welcome
Oh my
back.
goodness. It's a pleasure. It's always good to see you. Like you said, way back. And we
Wait,
don't have to talk every day to know that we're still connected. So that's what I like.
that's
The
right.
fact that
That's
we
right.
have relationships and we don't have to talk every day, call everybody, call every day. We can just know that we're in each other's heart. And that's special.
That is. I get that
Yeah, so
random
good to
text
see
with
you.
some hearts and glitter from you, and I was like, oh, it's like getting a hug.
Yeah, so good to see you and be with you today, indeed.
Thank you. Well, for those that don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about you?
Well, sure. So I'm Cynthia J. Hickman with the PhD, so you can call me doctor. I worked for it. Originally from Toledo, Ohio, registered nurse by profession, and did many years as a registered nurse, transitioned into case management with my nursing career. So I worked with families on the discharge planning side of nursing. And then I retired in 2013 to take care of my mom. So my mom was living with me and I took care of her for 20 years. I became a full-time caregiver. Mom passed in 2017 and I turned that journey into an advocacy program to help me with my grief. So I am your proactive caregiver advocate, and that is a platform of speaking. I keynote speak on the topics of caregiving, and then I'm an educator as far as the topics that impact elder care. So that's who I am, and I'm just glad to be here.
Wonderful. We're going to dive into all of that, which is a lot, but we're going to dive into all of that in this episode and really peel back some layers and share some vulnerable moments with all of you. But I think it's a really important topic for us to have, especially in public health, because we're give,
Yeah.
and this is the time for us to kind of sit back and receive a little bit in terms of how we can prepare and kind of look ahead. So before we get into all of that, though, let's talk about your journey. I love to know where you are now and to hear about all those things, but I think it's important to hear that journey. And so with that in mind, I'd love to kind of go back a little bit. So let's go all the way back to the time when you first learned about public health or first considered public health as a career. Tell me about that.
Well, believe it or not, I think I've known about it as a youth. I don't say youth, but teenage years. My teenage years was about healthcare, lifeguarding, and first aid. And we did it on a community base. And I really never connected the public health aspect of it. But when you think about it, the public is who I was serving. And so when you think about it from that perspective, the reality is that community health, public health is so connected that you really can't do one without the other. So my first journey was first aid, being a lifeguard at a swimming pool, serving the public when the kids would fall and scrape their leg, the band-aid, here I come. And then, of course, as I aged and grew up and recognized nursing and healthcare was someplace I wanted to be, it just went along. And so, of course, my educational journey, the nursing aspect of still people in the hospital, those are people in the public that now come into my community of a hospital, and now I'm serving them in capacity of healthcare. And then, of course, I did a lot of caring outside the hospital. So, therefore, I'm still in the public, still educating. So, when I would do workshops and little pop up topics with people on the different aspects of healthcare and problems that we have in the public, it just kind of evolved. And of course, it kind of fell into the healthcare, the elder care perspective, because of course I was dealing with my mom. And it was really important that elder care needs to be a public health issue. I'd hate to think that it's a crisis, but I saw a crisis during COVID when we had many people in facilities that families could not see. There was many things going on, and then of course the hospital, the same thing. So when I think about the public health perspective, I can say honestly, as a youth, I didn't know that's what it was called, but I know that's what I was doing. And as an adult now and practicing, I see it now that it's the relationship of public health has to do with serving the people in populations that need attention, specifically ones who might be vulnerable, because if we don't, who will?
Right. Right. Now, I think I know the answer to this, but is there a particular population or condition that you are most passionate about right now?
So if I think condition, I will say health related issues that cause elder care to have problems with safety, nutrition, and health. And I've used those three because they kind of come together. I'm concerned with the elder care population who is not able to manage their own care, and so they need a caregiving perspective, who may not understand their medication, so need a caregiver perspective. And some of those things are not automatic. You know, people have to understand why they're doing what they're doing, while they're taking what they're taking, because a lot of times the older people used to just do what the doctor said. And so in doing what the doctor says doesn't necessarily mean that they understand what the doctor is asking them to do. So I spend a lot of time helping people understand, explaining these type of techniques so they can care for the elders. So I want elders to age in place because they do better when they're home in their own environment with people that love them and know them. So I'm very big on aging in place.
Nice. Yeah. I am very familiar with the concept from firsthand experience. I mentioned in when it first happened and then across a couple episodes, I lost my mother the end of last year. And the years leading up to that, I was sort of the lead on her care. We can call it the team. I have siblings and all of her doctors and, healthcare team. I sort of took the lead on trying to help her understand. And you're right, there's so much that she did because she was always, her doctor said to do this a certain way, and she would get very involved in, but there's always so much, there's these gaps in what she understood, and she just kind of did what she was, told to do
Told to
because she
do.
just trusted. So I did a lot of explaining, and then it was important to her to remain independent. She wanted to live by herself. She lived 10 minutes away from me, but the idea of moving in with me was just like, that wasn't something she ever wanted to do. And it wasn't that she didn't like me or anything. It was just that she always wanted to be independent. It was very important to
Mhm.
her. So we did what we could do to allow her to age in place. And she remained, independent and even up to managing those last days with the fight with cancer. And so I definitely can understand that importance. And as I've shared with some of my friends and colleagues, especially those in the field of public health who are at this journey of maybe taking the lead of their elderly parents or their parents who are fighting some illness, and they're having to deal with that. I said a while back that I would love to do an episode where I could share a little bit more about my journey. I had to first get a little strong to where I could talk
Yeah.
about it without falling apart. But every time I brought up the idea, they were like, "Oh, I would love for you to do that. That would be so helpful." And I think it's because we're just always in that position of thinking about everybody else, doing everything else. You know, our elderly parents and being a caregiver can sneak up on us.
Hmm.
And so retrospectively, I look back and I see where we did a lot of things really well and we were really ahead of it. We were really, proactive. And then I can see where there were a lot of times we were reactive.
Hmm.
And
There's a word, Dr. Huntley, that I often share with people. I say to them sometimes when I have my talks, the first thing I say, how many of you have taken the blinders off as it relates to your elderly parents? And it kind of like they don't really know what I'm really asking them. And so I use examples like, if I'm 40, your parents are probably 60. If I'm 60, Your parents might be 80. What have you all seen in these 10-year gaps that might be something that you might need to pay attention to because it may show up? And if you're paying attention to these things, then you're not as surprised when something happens. And we're using some of the chronic disease examples when we in a family who may have had, we'll use diabetes. Diabetes is genetic. We can't do anything about genetics, but we can understand that this may come down our street. And if it does, then we can kind of be more prepared to do things differently, right? Or you go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, you have pre-diabetes. The word pre should give all of us pause to give us an opportunity to go back the other way. But we don't pay attention to that. We wait till something happens. The doctor said, do this, because as long as you're on the pre side, if you're pre-hypertensive, if you're pre-diabetic, what can we do so we don't end up in that shape, right? So if we end up in that shape, genetically speaking, well, we're not going to beat up on you about that, but we are going to say there's things you can do to control. I don't want your leg to cut off and then you miss that your leg is gone. If there's things that you can do. So that means maybe you need to pay attention to foot care. Because if you wear tight shoes that hurt your feet and they get sores and you don't pay attention to your feet, you get an infection, this, that, and the third. And where you are is a place you don't want to be, right? So when I say take the blinders off, I'm saying look around your family tree. See what it is that you may see might come knocking on your door. And what are some of the things that you can do to avoid it? Because if mama has it, you first need to take care of mama and daddy, auntie and uncle. But then by taking care of them, you're showing and you're preparing to the things that you might have to do if it comes your way.
Yeah.
And I think that's so crucial. And we don't do that because we live in a reactive society.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Tell us a little bit about, oh, I'm going to flip it, but it fits right into kind of what I was talking about, what you're talking about, more about what you're doing right now, because I know you have some great resources and you mentioned the speaking. What prompted you? Tell us about that, the books first. Let's talk about that. And what prompted you to write the book?
The first book, From the Lens of Daughter, Nurse, and Caregiver, A Journey of Duty and Honor, was a book I wrote about the journey of me caring for my mom. Now, interesting enough, I tried to write the book when she was still living. It didn't work that way. And then I later found out that was because I had to write the most difficult part of the book first, which was the hospice, the transition, her funeral, and all that. So I actually wrote it backwards. But the book is a journey of caring for my mom. The first thing was moving mom from Ohio to Texas. She lived in Ohio 60 some odd years. That's where she went to work. That's where she went to church. She attended a church there for over 50 years. And all of a sudden, she lived in a house that had a basement. The washer and dryer was in the basement, and mama's knees were getting bad. And so we started paying attention to this is going to be really serious. And mom lived by herself as well because daddy died when we were 11. So mama raised us on her own. But as we looked at how her house was and how she was getting bad knees and aching, we knew something needed to change. So we moved mom from Ohio to Texas. But this is how it happened. When we started seeing this, we would have mom visit. Come to Texas, check it out. She was still with me. I have another sister here. And so we started her visiting first. We didn't just snatch her out of our house and say, you old, you got to go. We didn't do that. So we gave her a chance to see what it would feel like to move to another place. So that took some time. So in the book, we talk about the journey from Texas to Ohio because it's important to know when an older person has been in their own environment for all these years, just pulling them out can be very traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important that you ease them into it. So we did that, which was helpful. So the book then tells that journey of that, the things that happened when she was here. A funny story when we were in school together, Charlotte, I don't know if I ever told you this. One of the way I tried to keep her cognitive mind going, her fine motor skills going. Chapter 3 of my book I gave to my dissertation. And my mother was an educator. So my way of keeping her reading, keeping her mind sharp, I gave her my third chapter of my dissertation with a red pen. Now I'm thinking to myself, and I had looked at this thing a zillion times. So to me, it was fantastical, no problems. I could turn it in. The chair would be so excited. Listen, Shirley, when Shirley gave me back that book, that chapter, it had more red marks. The ink in the pen was gone. I said, Lord have mercy. And then you know what I said next? You won't get another chapter. But that was my way of keeping her active and reading and writing and stuff. That was funny. So that's the fun part of it. Took her to a museum because mom was a teacher, like I said. So we went to an area where you could put round pegs in round holes, square pegs in round holes. Because again, I'm trying to keep mind and fingers going. And I noticed that mom used to she would slide the pegs into the hole versus like really putting them in. And I said to her jokingly, "You're acting old, and I'm going to put you in somewhere if you keep acting old." But what I really saw, Charlotte, is that her vision was going.
Mm.
I never told her that, but I noticed that she was not connecting because her vision was going. Later found out she had cataracts.
Oh,
I was paying attention.
yeah, yeah.
Because I knew what she used to do
Right.
and I saw changes. And so that's the importance of aging in place because sometimes you can see these things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So the book tells a story like that. So I turn it into a story, but what it really is saying is when you read my story, this could be your story.
Mm-hmm.
Your mother could have vision problems. Your mother could have bad knees. She could have bad joints. Her vision may be bad. Her hands may be arthritic. So when you're reaching up in the cabinet to get something, something could fall out, break, and she could get hurt. So my whole mind is about safety and environment and paying attention because the goal is you don't want anybody to be hurt.
Right.
So safety is so important as people age in place. So the story kind of goes like that. And then the last chapter actually talks about informal and formal caregiving. So I was an informal caregiver at home, but in the hospital where I worked, I was a formal caregiver, nurse. And so the distinction between being in a hospital where you push a button and 20 people come and being at home and it's you, yourself, and I, and ain't nobody coming at 3 a.m. It's you. So it's a very nice story of these are the things could happen in the caregiving space, and I wanted to share it with everybody.
I
So that was book one.
I love that, and I'll make sure that we provide links to it in the show notes. And I recommend
Okay.
it because listening to you, I think it's the type, and I did not get to read it before I went through this process with my mom.
Mhm.
But listening to you, I recommend it. I think for people way before you think you need it,
Right.
to read and to pick up on things that you can watch out for, and then to
Right.
already have it on hand in case you find yourself in the process and you want it as that great reference book,
Right.
because those
Right.
stories are how we resonate. And maybe you may read it one time and it doesn't stand out to you, but 2 or 3 years
Hmm.
later when you're at a different stage of life, it could really sing and ring out to you.
Absolutely. And believe it or not, someone said that to me. They read the book and they said, "Oh, I wish I'd have read this book 2 years ago."
Mm-hmm.
Because what it did was help them recognize that they weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
And they talked about one story of their dad falling because they looked at I think the dad had a walker
Mm-hmm.
and the walker wheel, one of the wheels was off or something like that. And so dad, because he still didn't think he needed it, you ever seen people hold the walk and walk with
Yes.
it? It's not even on the ground.
Yes.
But the reality of it was he was doing that because it wouldn't roll because there was a wheel missing. So if he had put it on the ground, he may have failed,
Right,
right?
right,
Because it's uneven.
right.
And so he said, I wish I'd have read your book back then.
Yeah.
I said, no time like the present,
I
because you start where you are.
yeah, I remember when I convinced my mother to move from Mississippi to South Carolina because I wanted her to be close to me. And that was let's see, maybe it was right after her 70th birthday.
Okay.
So a few years after that, so early 70s. And I knew as she aged, I wanted her to be closer to me. I knew she wasn't going to live with me, but I wanted her to be close. So I shopped. She was already in the habit of traveling to see us often
Mm.
here. She loved to travel. But here, as opposed to the small town that she was in, I'd listened to her complaints about things that she liked to do and what
Mm.
she was restricted. And so I sold her on, you can do these things here. And I kind of solved for that here, and that helped to make an easier sale. And it was, but I took into account all the benefits and all the things, the little things that I knew mattered to her. I tried to account for
Yeah.
all those things. So I didn't tell her she had to do it. Like you said, you don't just say you're old, you got to do this. But I just stacked everything in favor of her, make it easy for her to say yes. And then she got excited
Mhm.
about the move. And then once
Right.
she was
Right.
here, now I think about the last probably 4 or 5 years, there are so many things that I could catch up with because we had a meeting, a coffee date every Saturday. And that was so
Mm.
that it was as I was building my business. So when at the very beginning, those early podcast
Mhm.
episodes, I was trying to
Mhm.
explain to mom what a podcast was, and I would go over and I'd play it on my phone and let her like turn the app on and let her hear an episode and we listen together. Or I take my laptop over there and I tell her about what was happening in the business, and she gets so excited and be so
Mhm.
involved. And it allowed me to just be with her. I
With
could put
her.
eyes on her, be
Mhm.
with her in her environment and see. So I could watch things shift. I could watch how she
Yeah.
changed. Those little things that you pick up on just from being around her. And my siblings all lived
Right.
at a distance. So when I started to notice certain things, they didn't necessarily notice because they couldn't see
Mhm.
her. So you could talk to her
Mhm.
on Saturday morning. She could sound like this, and this is great. And then an hour later, she could be in the bed, which is odd for her.
Right.
And, so I just it allowed me to spend time with her and those little things that I would just notice and pick up
Mhm.
on. And I didn't even know I was doing it right back then. I was just,
Absolutely, and but you see, that is so important that you at least you were, in nursing they teach us about assessment skills, observational skills, and one of the things I talk about sometimes is I never let mother know I was watching her
yeah,
because they don't want to be policed.
right,
They don't want to feel like they're old and they need you to watch them.
right.
So, I never did a lot of, okay, mom, I'm watching you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because as much as we can, I worked so hard to allow her
Yeah.
independence. Just like as you state,
Mm-hmm.
it's so important when they already feel like they're losing a part of their independence, right? You spend as much time as you can trying to make them independent, let them be independent to the things that they can.
Yeah.
And then when you see safety becoming an issue, then you have to step in because again, we don't want them to be injured. And when you think about it, Dr. Huntley, really the whole reason why we should love on our loved ones is, seeing them hurt and injured because of something that we could have done is a feeling that nobody wants.
Right.
Here in Texas, there was a situation of a family who had their granddad in a nursing home. And as the story goes, the granddaughter felt the need to put a camera in the nursing home room where the granddad was. Because everybody's living life, they're going to work, they're doing what they're doing, and probably they couldn't afford to not work.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the mere fact, I think what really got me the most was the fact that they truly felt the need to put a camera in their granddad's room.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that was a red flag, and I didn't even have to know the man,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, of course, that particular day or however it happened, two of the nursing assistants were very gruff with the man, very mean to the man, pulled him out the bed. He fell on the floor. He broke his hip. I mean, just a whole, and all this was on camera.
Mm.
He ended up in a hospital and he subsequently died. Now, of course, I'm furious at the nurse aides,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think I was even more furious at the granddaughter because just the fact that you felt the need to put a camera in your granddad's room should have been the reddest flag that you've ever seen. And I just couldn't fathom what you were supposed to find out about that.
Yeah.
And you got what you found out, and it wasn't good.
Yeah.
So I just say that because even in our best effort to care for our loved ones, we have to avoid the reactive behaviors that we do because they're costly. And on the same hand, when you put someone in a facility, you expect them to give your loved ones care.
Right.
That is the expectation. And anything other than that, of course, we know is unacceptable.
So that example with the camera is a reactive action because she already had there's something that prompted her to. So which I don't know if I'm moving now to the second book, but which one of your books then I know would help with guidance on how to navigate this part of the journey when you're actively caring and providing the, what to do and how to set it up and how to find the
Right,
right facility and what happens if you need to move
right,
and things like that. Is that the second book?
right. The second book is about the business side of caregiving. And to your point, yes and no.
Okay.
Finding a facility takes effort because no two facilities are alike.
Mm-hmm.
The people who work in them, we don't know. You really just have to do your due diligence and your homework. And you have to show up.
Yeah.
The Black Book of Important Information for Caregivers has a portion in there about respite facilities if you need to get away, if you're caring for someone in the home. And the facilities that are available to allow you to have respite are out there. I actually put my mother in one. That was the worst week of my life. I put her in a respite facility because I wanted to go to my friend's 65th birthday party in Ohio. And I wanted to take my husband with me. And I kept trying to figure out what I'm going to do with mom. So my daughter actually worked at a facility at the time. She said, well, Mama, let him come to my facility. And so I thought about it. I thought about it and prayed about it and cried about it and cried about it and prayed about it. So he eventually made it happen. Listen, Mother had the best experience at this facility. The administrators called me every day. They sent me pictures of mom learning French. They did French classes. They did crafting. They did bingo. They did walks in the park or whatever they were doing. Mama said, well, if y'all ever put me in a home, put me in this one. I'm like, okay. But Charlotte, the first 2 days I cried.
Yeah.
Because I was just worried about who's going to do this, and when I did the application, I said and I'm paying for this, 2 attendants at all times
Mm-hmm.
to help with the bathroom because, she was kind of stiff with her knees. She could stand up a little bit, but the pivot was some kind of strain. So you need people on both sides. So when the lady told me when we took her, well, this is Sally Ann and Sally Ann is going to take care of mom. I said, and where's Jane? Where Molly? I said, because we need 2 people here.
Right.
And so, she kind of chuckled. I said, I'm not chuckling.
Yeah.
And so that was important to me. So they figured it out and fixed it and all that. But I cried because I didn't know what to expect.
Right. Yeah.
But they fooled me and I was so grateful. And mom had a great time. And when I left her that time shot, I'll never forget it. Mama said, y'all coming back, aren't you? She said, y'all coming back, aren't you? I said, I'll be back.
Well, that facility is great because they, that connection, the information. We had to do this with my husband lost his mother earlier last year. So before I lost my mother, but his dad was thinking about coming here and we were looking for a place for him and we toured a few and talked to some people. And you're right. You really have to get in there. You need to talk to some people. We were both like, I was looking at through one lens and my husband was looking through a different lens. And there's just things you have to put a little time and a little effort in. My father-in-law ended up not moving up here, but I did go through that part of the process of trying to find things.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm going to make sure that we provide links to both of your books in the show notes because I recommend starting with number 1, starting with the first one and the stories and then, and then progress to the next one. And just depending on where you are in your journey.
In your
But if
journey.
you're at a
Correct.
place where you think, oh, that's so far away, then get the first book and go ahead and read that.
Mhm.
That's what I would recommend.
But you know what? Sometimes I would say, Dr. Huntley, sometimes the first book, the second book might be more important than the first book, because what happens is when you need to have information, then you're trying to get it and you're in this
Oh,
state of confusion and you're in the state of grief if you're on that
mm-hmm.
side, or you see someone transitioning and you have to decide about hospice. You don't have your documents in
Yeah,
place, you don't have information in place, you don't have insurance in place, you don't have, if they're at death, military people, there's that the form DDD 14 is important to have because you can bury them at no cost because of military. I mean, all these information document wise, sometimes you need to have them. And, in our era, Mama had documents, they were
mm-hmm.
tangible. And although we're electronic, some people need and
Right.
require tangible documents. So it's not a bad idea to start looking for
So
them
the
now
second book
or
is what
finding
helps
out
with
where they
all of
are.
that. Okay,
The second book helps with
great.
that,
Okay.
yeah. And you need to have them because even funeral
Mm-hmm.
homes, they don't want to. They're not going to look at your phone and look for.
That's true.
They're not doing that.
Been through
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, so it's kind of go to bed. You kind of like, again, if you're proactive and you don't look at it, oh, somebody's going to
Mm-hmm.
die. You look at it as being
Right.
prepared. The more you're prepared, the better off you are, because when grief happens, all this stuff goes out
That's
the window.
right. Well,
It just goes out the
yeah,
window.
I'm gonna definitely link to that, and then I'm gonna also, because I know the listeners in our podcast audience is a diverse group of listeners. I'm personally going to really lean in and highly recommend, if anyone needs, if you work or leader of an organization that could benefit from having this type of discussion in a group setting, a workshop, I
Hmm.
recommend that you connect with Dr. Hickman and explore having her come speak and lead a workshop at your organization, your community, and just help this message get out to
Mhm.
people, and these resources be available. I think this is just really important, and thank you for coming and talking about it too.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Huntley. There's another interesting concept that I was thinking about when you mentioned that, because when we are in the workforce, we know we have to take care of ourselves and we know we have to work. So I often wonder what organizations are truly doing to identify their staff or their employees who may find themselves in situations like this. We have FMLA for importance when people need to use it. Um, but what else do they put in place? Do they have a mental health day? Do they have a, a gift certificate day for someone who's a caregiver for their loved one at home? Something to let them know that we care versus just always working on your job to do what you do. Because that gives people hope to know that, yeah, and then really there go I, by the grace of God. Who's gonna take care of you one day, or who's gonna take care of your loved one day? And don't we all want to be taken care of in a way that we can feel good about at the end of the road?
Yeah, absolutely. So great resource for sure.
Mhm, mhm.
Dr. Hickman, this has been fabulous time to catch up. I thank you for being here, not only the catch up and for being able to share this resource, but also helping me to be able to have this discussion, because I really wanted to share a little bit more with the audience, kind of what just a little bit of what I've learned on this journey, and encourage you to be a much more proactive and not wait.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah,
really recommend the resources and connecting with Dr. Hickman on LinkedIn at the very least, and following what kind of
yeah.
information she puts out, and getting to her a little bit better too. So thank you for being here. I so appreciate you.
I have to share this last comment with everybody, with our listeners. I want everybody to remember we all are pilgrims passing through, and ain't none of us gonna get out here alive. So let's be proactive.
That's great, great, great final words. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I appreciate you.